I'm Evan Smith. They're the comedians, writers, and actors who've lent their talents to one of the iconic institutions in American comedy and have gone on to become some of the biggest names in entertainment and pop culture. They're the alums of Saturday Night Live. This is Overheard.
Let's be honest. Is this about the ability to learn, or is this about the experience of not having been taught properly?
How have you avoided what has befallen other nations in Africa and
You could say that he made his own bed, but you caused him to sleep in it.
You know, you saw a problem and over time took it on. And let's start with the sizzle before we get to the steak. Are you going to run for president?
I think I just got an F from you, actually. This is over.
You got on the show in part because of Dana Carvey, right? Dana Carvey got...
Well, Dana and I, Dana and I knew each other from the stand-up
Right.
Circuit, and Dana was also renting a room over the garage in this house I was renting with some other comics in the Hollywood Hills.
Yeah.
When he came down from San Francisco, he would stay there. And we, we would kind of jam in the driveway on, with different kind of character stuff. I wasn't a character impressionist or anything, I just did stand-up.
Yeah.
But Dana, of course, was into all that.
Seemed like that was his big thing.
Yeah. So Dana got the show that summer of '86, and they start in the fall.
Yep.
So he goes to New York. I'm dating Jan Hooks at the time. We were friends for about 6 years, and then we started dating, which is the best way to do it. Yeah. But that didn't last. And, and
she was on the show at that point?
She was not on the show.
Not on the show.
I was excited for Dana and for Jan because they were up for Saturday Night Live. Dana had it already. Jan was up for it, sure to get it. And I'm reading Backstage Live, Saturday Night Live, and excited for them. Never thinking I would ever be on that show because I didn't really even have the representation to get me an audition, and I didn't do characters. I never did an improv. I wasn't brought up in the improv ranks, and so Dana calls me from New York that summer, and he goes, "Hey, I think they're still looking for one more cast member. I told them about you, and I think they might want to see your tapes."
I want to ask you about Weekend Update specifically. The show is now going through a transition, as it has a couple different times, from Seth Meyers now to Cecily Strong being the only anchor of that program. She's talked about the challenge and the pressure, having to step into those shoes, what it's like. You were 3 years in that chair. You did a great job. People remember that time very fondly. Can you talk about what it was like? Because it is really not like being just a regular cast member.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's added responsibility, especially if you're doing sketches as well.
Right.
Dennis did a great job up there, but he wasn't doing sketches mostly.
Did.
Yeah. So
Tina Fey most of the time also was just not doing sketches.
But Tina Fey was also the head writer on the show. Yeah. It was hard to get people to write jokes for Weekend Update because it wasn't a glorifying position. People on Monday weren't talking about Weekend Update jokes so much. They were talking more about characters or whatever they saw. And so they would try to entice writers to come up to the 17th floor at 30 Rock on Saturday morning.
Yep.
Because you couldn't really write jokes before that because all the other late night talk show hosts would do the jokes already. Yep. They would cover that territory. So you had to really wait until like Friday night, Saturday morning. And so they would put out a breakfast buffet and newspapers and AP photos. There was no internet or Google at the time.
Right.
So AP photos and newspapers. And a lot of the writers would come up just to have breakfast and read the paper. It was a hot buffet,
Yeah.
And then some of the younger writers would come up to try to write, jokes, but they mostly weren't good. And then there was Al Franken, who was, a political junkie, and a couple other people. And then I would write, I'd get maybe 3 or 4 jokes on a week. And then I would pay, out of my own pocket, $50 to friends on the West Coast or in New York to fax me in jokes.
Yep.
That I would pay for.
Comedy writers.
People that wanted to write. And so we would get about 20 jokes out of all that. And it was, but it was a fun job.
Yeah.
It was a fun, thing. It was a nice change for me after being on the show for five years.
It was a transformational thing to get that show, right? For everyone who's been on that show, even the people who had bad experiences on that show, will say that being on that program was transformed their careers.
I guess so. Yeah. For me, it happened bless you. For me, it happened so quickly because, I had like 3 days to get to New York. And I had friends that didn't even know I was on the show.
Right.
And, but it is it does change your life, you know, just to be on that show and to be in New York.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it. I liked it. You know, a lot of people complained about the schedule and the stress, but I knew for me it was a marathon. It wasn't a sprint.
Right. It's almost a cliche at this point to have been on the show and to say, oh, it was so hours were so bad and everything was so difficult. And, you know.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I loved it. You know, I didn't stay up late like a lot of people. You know, the original cast would stay up, you know, Tuesday night all night long and write sketches for the next day, and that's because they were doing drugs back then, you know. And when I came in on the show, nobody was doing drugs. You know, I came in with Phil Hartman and Dana Carvey and, you know, Jan Hooks and those people, and everybody was pretty responsible. And it was a different time then too. Right. So you know, it was sensible hours for me, and you know, I got to meet some of my idols that I, you know, grew up watching or listening to: Paul McCartney, Mick Jagger, James Taylor, all these people that I loved and I got to be friends with, and Steve Martin, and so I loved the job.